Okay, I'll now call the meeting to order. Okay, the Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting for September 9th is now in order. Dr. Puppet, I believe you have some public comment to read.
Yep, I sure do. So we have 3 items of public comment. The first one is from Jean Morano. My name is Jean Morano, and I'm a senior citizen living in the Whittier area. I'm writing to voice my concern that I see no mention of plans for the reopening of schools now that Governor Hogan has stated that schools may be reopened. COVID-19 cases continue to decline, and the board has not fully weighed all of the issues surrounding the board's decision to go virtual. There are insufficient daycare centers either open and or affordable to those parents who must work during the day and don't have the luxury of being home with their children. Those same parents are then faced with the insurmountable task of keeping up with their child's schoolwork, a daily volume of emails written in school jargon, a technology system that is not easily understandable to student or parent, and a technology system that was not ready for prime time's volume as witnessed by today's 9/8 complete crash. Additionally, many of us seniors are having to take on full-time childcare for which we are unprepared. And last but not least is the effect this is having on the children's psyche, which is apparent from all we see in the news with increased depression, suicides, and other conditions. This is enough in itself and to warrant getting our kids back to school as soon as possible. I urge the board to take immediate action towards reopening the schools by the end of the first quarter. Thank you. The second item is from Tracy Chevelle. Most of the middle school classes at our daughter's school requires the students to show their faces during class. Our high schooler, on the other hand, doesn't have to. I feel when a teacher isn't able to connect with the faces of their students, it takes away the connection between student and teacher. If an educator doesn't have but icons to teach to, I don't really feel they're getting the respect they deserve as a teacher, and they're not getting the visual feedback of facial expressions during lectures. I feel it should be mandatory for all students to show their faces to make a more personal experience, and so we don't lose touch of our social interactions between humans. If students choose not to show their faces, they should be docked points and recorded as a no-show. Question, is this possible to make mandatory? And the third comment we've received says, good morning, my name is Kevin Moore, and I'm a parent of FCPS 2nd and 6th graders. I would like to voice my concern over the current elementary and middle school schedules. The State Board of Education voted to require 3.5 hours of synchronous instruction per day, and FCPS has publicly acknowledged this requirement. However, neither of my children's schedules currently meet this mark. The elementary schedule only meets 3.5 hours if you credit every minute outside of lunch until 2 p.m. And even then, that's only 4 days a week. The middle school schedule falls short as well, only averaging 2.6 hours per day, a full 25% below the absolute bare minimum. I understand the definition from the state of what can be counted as synchronous gives relatively large amount of leeway. This leeway will give you latitude to either seek ways to justify any and everything as synchronous to meet the bare minimum requirement, or seek ways to meaningfully maximize the synchronous instruction given to our children. I hope and expect that you will take the latter. Those are the public comments that I have, Ms. Yoho.
Thank you, Dr. Cuppet. And just to remind anyone that might be watching, public comment is not a time where we answer questions. So, Dr. Cuppet, I hope those, if there were questions, that those get passed on to the proper person. I'm sure you've done that. And if people want the whole board to hear a comment, they should send that to the email that is in the agenda for the full board meeting later today.
And Ms. Yoho, I did ask Linda Rains, who serves as the minutes for this, to send that to Kathy Fostick so they can be included in board docs.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So the minutes from the August 5th meeting, are there any corrections or additions? Okay, those will stand as approved then. Excuse me. Any board member comments? Mr. Mason, Ms. Gallagher? All right, we'll move on to our presentations then. So we have health and physical education updates. Take it away.
Yeah, so good morning. I want to thank Mr. Hitchner and Mr. Griffith for being here. For those of you that are watching in the public, we periodically will bring updates by content area to the C&I committee. There's been some timely things happening in this area, and I'm going to turn it over to Brian and Jamie at this time, and they'll control the presentation.
So good morning, board members. I'm Jamie Hitchner, the curriculum specialist for elementary health and physical education. Good to be with all of you and those that are viewing and attending. With me controlling the PowerPoint, as Dr. Cuppert had said, is Brian Griffith. Brian is the secondary curriculum specialist for health and physical education. So if we could take to the next slide, we'll just go over our agenda. We just have 4 points to bring to you today. I'll be speaking about the health and physical education updates that have transpired within the last half of the year, and also speak to you about new changes regarding permission slips. And then Brian will follow up with the review of the Family Life Advisory Committee and seek the board's considerations and decisions for how we may go forward with the interpretation of COMAR. There is a new process for material review that we will also go over today. And with that, we'll get right into our health and physical education updates. So last spring, the Maryland State Department of Education was on constant move to provide new frameworks for the curriculum that Brian and I oversee for our local school system. And those frameworks were adopted by the state. I believe the health was in June, and before that was the physical education adopted and posted in April. So moving forward, we're busy putting together teacher leader teams at this time to make sure that our frameworks in Frederick County Public Schools are in alignment with the state document. And as it looks right now, we anticipate no significant changes. I believe our school system was out in front of many of these changes, and so that we wouldn't characterize any of these as being significant with our local essential curriculum. From that outcome, when we get information in alignment for the teacher leaders working on that alignment, we will then begin working on benchmarks to make sure the benchmark assessments will be updated accordingly. The most significant change that we could address here on this slide is just your elementary, your K-12 health education, just not necessarily the health education content, but just the way it's organized. It'll be organized into specific skills-based content strands. And again, we're very much ahead of that here locally. Already putting it in practice, in fact. So with that, we'll go and speak about permission slips. Prior to that, I wanted to address the new health education COMAR that was released in December of last school year. Just wanted to take a few moments of your time to highlight some of those pieces that just wanted to bring to your attention. Again, in many, if not all of these cases, Frederick County Public Schools was already in implementation phase of many of these updates that have been made through COMAR. But just drawing your attention to the materials that were previously shared with you. Section D under special requirements, there's a statute for substance abuse prevention. Students shall complete instruction on drug addiction and prevention that includes instruction related to heroin and opioid addiction and prevention, and information related to lethal effects of fentanyl. This instruction is to be delivered at a minimum once in grade bands 3 through 5, once in grade bands 6 through 8, and once in grade bands 9 through 12. It should be addressed as a standalone program. The other significant requirement in Family Life Human Sexuality talks about the students opting out. We'll talk about that in the next slide here, but I just wanted to address that accordingly in Section D. And then in the topic of safety and violence prevention, students shall participate in age-appropriate instruction on the awareness and prevention of sexual abuse and assault. Teachers who are trained to provide instruction on the awareness and prevention of sexual abuse and assault shall deliver this instruction. So training is mandatory. This will include age-appropriate instruction on the meaning of consent and the respect for personal boundaries. The next topic is disease prevention and control. Just highlighting a few pieces there. In previous renditions of COMAR, there was a parent permission slip needed for HIV and AIDS education. There is no longer a permission slip needed in that area. And that really brings about the points that I wanted to highlight in terms of COMAR, and those updates, wanted to share those with you. And how we are, again, moving forward in the implementation phase. Again, mentioned the only significant change as we look at it, it deals with the permission slips. Parents can still opt out of family life instruction, and that permission is passive. So Brian and I have put together sample find out first messages and sample permission slips of what that would look like, and they are already being distributed to schools. Trainings are ongoing. Some training has taken place to this point as teachers receive pre-service instruction, and subsequent training is scheduled for October and November in the months ahead. So with that, I'll turn the next part of the presentation over to Brian, who's going to talk to you about Family Life Advisory Council items.
Good morning, CNI members. I just wanted to, Jamie and I are here representing the Family Life Advisory Committee. The Family Life Advisory Committee has two things that they would like you to review today. The first are 2 items of for videos for review, and the second one is the process for material approval with the updated COMAR. So the first thing are the 2 videos that the board has the Family Life Committee has suggested for approval to the board. The first one is Behind the Post, and this is a high school video that talks about what kids are showing on social media and what actually happens behind the scenes. Again, looking at social media profile, a profile is typically something that shows one side of something. And what we want kids to understand is that there are 2 sides to every story, and that there are more things going on in a relationship than what is just posted on social media. So it is a short clip, only a little over 5 minutes long. And again, most of the videos that I have been bringing to you have been short videos because we want the teachers to be doing the instruction. The videos are only the motivator, the catch, and then the teacher goes through instruction. The second video is meant for 7th grade. It is titled STDs. Again, in our instruction, we have changed things over to STIs. But it is 7th grade video. Again, a short video, a little over 3 minutes for 7th graders, just providing some information related to STDs. Again, that would be the motivator, the hook, and then the teacher would go through with instruction. The links that I gave you are both YouTube links, but both publishers have already given us permission that if these videos are approved, we can implement them and include them in our Schoology courses. So the Family Life Committee is asking for this committee's approval to move those on to full board for approval and implementation in our schools.
Okay, so Brian, you'd like us to go ahead and take care of that motion then first, or make a motion and take care of approving that first before we move on. Okay.
Please.
Do we have a motion to
So
approve
moved.
the videos? Thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay, is there any comment? Day or Ray, any thoughts? I'll say that I agreed with a lot of the comments from the Family Life Committee. The first one, Behind the Post, I didn't read what it was going to be about, or I was slow to catch on, and somebody made that comment. By the end of it, it was very clear. I thought it was going to go in a totally different direction of cyberbullying kind of thing. So, oops, sorry, phone's ringing. So I thought their comments were absolutely correct. And just a question, that could be taught anywhere from 9th or included in a class of 9th graders up to seniors, correct? Depending on when they take their health class.
Correct. Our current, the majority of students do take that in 9th grade.
Okay. because that was the other comment, that they seem to be more like college students. So it was a little racy in the beginning, like, where's this going? But, kids watch all sorts of things. So yeah, I think if family life is fine with it. And again, you're pointing out that the teacher is going to be the main one leading the conversation and taking it from there. I have no problem with those. Jay and Ray.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had the same sort of and I saw the comments in the document from the Family Life Committee as well, that with the behind the post, it seemed like these were maybe slightly older teenagers or young adults. But I agree. I think that overall it could lead to some really good, valuable conversation, and it's an important one to be having. So I have no objection, but appreciated reading the comments and being able to view it in advance.
And my apology, are we doing each video separately or both as a group?
That's up to you guys.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and then vote on behind the post. So Jay, Ray, I vote aye.
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 Okay. And how about what are STDs? What did you think of that one? I guess I had, again, the same kind of, the Family Life Committee is, it seems to be right on. I had some of the same comments. Some of it was like, I was glad it was a cartoon, but it was like, oh, that's kind of yucky, but then they're yucky. So how do you, I guess the teacher just has to really stress that we now call them STIs, not STDs. That's.
So just as a side note as well, yes, you are correct. We do correct that language, and we do talk to them about sexually transmitted infections. That is the current term from our health department, and our health practitioners are suggesting that we use in our school system. But as a side note, both of these videos, we have partnered with the organizations that publish them. So Behind the Post is One Love Foundation. They have an office in Baltimore. And Grace Carmichael is the education specialist that comes out and has trained our teachers in the past on implementing their resources. And she will continue to do that with this resource as well. Amaze is Advocates for Youth, and Nora Gelperin also has done training with our teachers in the past and has agreed to continue to do that training this year as well. So as we move forward, both of these are supported by national experts, and our teachers will receive training on proper implementation of both of these resources.
Very good. Yeah, as someone who taught third grade personal body safety for many years, I learned to let the students know that when the little girl hits the doll, the one we used to show for years when I was doing that, and they would laugh, and I would be so horrified. So if I prefaced it with understand what's happening when she hits her doll, it's because that's, then it went much better. They took it much more seriously. So the teachers being trained and knowing what to expect, because I could see some laughter coming, and laughter is not necessarily bad, if then you get into serious conversations. So anyway, all right. So is there a motion to accept What Are STDs video?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, you have approval of both of those to send them on.
Thank you very much. And I believe, Dr. Cuppet, what is going to happen is that they will be on the board consent agenda in 2 weeks. Is that clear?
That's typically how we do it, unless there's some kind of rush.
Okay. Thank you. The next item that the Family Life Committee would like you to review is the guidance on material review. And so with the updated COMAR, the past COMAR required this process, that there was a community review panel. That review panel suggested items to the board for approval. With the latest rendition of COMAR for health education, that approval of Board of Education has been removed to make it similar to other content areas. But in D Special Requirements Part 2C, it does talk that the local board obviously has control over curriculum and can determine what process they want for curriculum review. And so what Jamie and I are going to present right now is just what the board, what the committee is suggesting for a new process. And again, what we are suggesting, obviously, we don't think that this is something. We are looking for your guidance as to how we can proceed and who actually would give us this approval. This is a practice. It is not a policy or a regulation. And so it could be determined that the three of you give us guidance and we can move forward, or that the three of you would take this to the full board for guidance on what our new practice of material review for health education might be. So our current process is that teachers identify a resource. Now, for example, the two videos that you just you approved to move on to the full board were reviewed and approved by my teachers in summer curriculum writing of 2019. The Family Life Committee approved those videos suggested those videos for approval in October and November of 2019. Now, these videos were supposed to go to you in May, but with everything that happened, obviously this was postponed until this point in time. But typically, when my teachers approve a resource and it goes to Flack, typically my teachers can't use that video for about 12 to 15 months after approval because of this approval time. So the Family Life Committee is suggesting a new review process. And so what they would like to do is they would like to change, and so still be in compliance with COMAR, but also still make sure that we're getting input from the community. And again, our Flack makeup is representation from each feeder pattern. We have members at large, we have health professionals, we have a practicing doctor, a practicing pediatrician, we have the health department, we have administrators, we have teachers, we have a board member sits on it as a non-voting member, and the student member also sits on it as a non-voting member currently at this point in time. But what they are suggesting is that they could be the final point in approval of resources, so that when teachers identify a resource, Jamie and I would bring it to the Family Life Committee, and then that the committee would be the final approval. And what they suggested is that, again, currently the board member and the student board member are non-voting members. They would say that in the new makeup of the bylaws that the board member and the student board member would have voting rights on the Family Life Committee. So that's the one that they are suggesting to be implemented. In my mind, the board could determine that the current process needs to stay in place and that the teachers identify, Family Life reviews it, CNI approves it, it goes to full board. Again, it could also go the other extreme of meeting COMAR and basically say health is just like every other content and does not need this extra step in approval of resources. Thank you.
So, Ms. Yoho, what our hope would be is that, out of transparency, COMAR gave us a lot of latitude, right? It's just another content. But because of the nature of the content that we're looking at here and sensitivity to the community, I think Mr. Griffith and Mr. Hitchner have put forward in their conversations with Flack a really reasonable process. We would be happy to come and share that directly with the full board in maybe a work session if you would like, or if you guys want to have that conversation as part of a committee report and see if the board feels that this new process is we can serve your interest in any way, but we are seeking a direction to move towards this Flack reviewed process rather than the much more kind of the long lasting process of going to the CNI and then to the full board. So that's what we're seeking today.
Thoughts, Jay, Ray, any thoughts?
What would be the time frame if it's just the Flack committee approving it?
So the Flack committee does meet 4 or 5 times a year. And so if my teachers were able to identify something over the summer, or even in curriculum writing during the fall or whatever else, those resources could be implementing the following semester for high school, or even the following term. So it could be reduced to 3 or 4 months.
And we couldn't possibly do that with CNI and the board?
I think the rolling together of those agendas, I don't think we could get to 4 months. If the first Flack meeting, Brian, when does that usually occur? Is that October or September?
Usually September, early October.
So if we have the first meeting, we'd almost, Mr. Mason, to your point, we'd almost have to back up a Flack meeting in August. And it's just, I find that's a challenging time to do any kind of meeting that has family representation, obviously for vacation. So let's assume it's September, comes out of Flack mid-September, then we'd probably be looking at CNI, not in October, rather November. And then we'd be able to approve in November, and then you'd be looking at consent two weeks after that. So probably the second board meeting in November. The only challenge is that kind of puts pressure on Flack to actually concentrate or condense their conversation around the resources that are in there. So let's say they're given a certain number. If they're only given one or two, then they might be able to discuss those thoroughly in one meeting. If there's a number of these things, they may want to take up to 2 meetings. So it really depends, I think, Brian, on the volume of stuff coming to Flack, because it's a group that really does spend a lot of time talking about the nuance of these different resources and materials. So we could possibly, I mean, COVID didn't help obviously this year with our approval process, but this would expedite it. The question would be, it also takes another thing off of the board's plate. My guess is different districts are doing this different ways. We haven't heard yet back from all the other districts how it's being handled. Some will go the route of just approving it, and some will probably maintain the board control over it.
My thought, I mean, obviously the shortened time frame is preferable because especially these type of videos, I find, we're already pointing out to some things that are lagging behind. And that was always the case that I found with a lot of the materials. So when you're adding conceivably another year or at least 6 months, you're now really starting to date things and kind of their usefulness becomes less in the end. And we approve the Flack members. So ultimately we're selecting the committee. We're not selecting, but approving the committee from amongst the people that apply to be on it. So that's kind of where our control would always be. A concern I see if we kind of give over control is that then they have to take the flack from the public. And through us, or we get the flack when we're not, not us, we can't. So like by relinquishing control is the grief from the public going to be rightly placed? I don't know. Those are just some random thoughts that I had. My first thought was I would rather the whole board decide this than just the 3 of us.
So, I'm sorry. So if that's what you would like to do, would Ms. Yoho, would you prefer us to go ahead and put this on an agenda item? We'll move these 2 videos through for consent, so that'll roll those out. Mm-hmm. We can bring Mr. Griffith and Mr. Hitchner back, and maybe even a member of the Flack committee themselves. You have a board member who already serves, so there would be a lot of people that could present the 2 options. We could share that publicly, so the public would know what the conversation the board is about to have is really about. Mm-hmm. The board could engage in a conversation, and then you guys could make motions and make a decision about whether you want to stick with the current process, use the one that's proposed, or maybe even a variant of that. One option for expediting, if the board does want to maintain final say, to have that responsibility as you're indicating, Ms. Yoho, it could be, and I don't want to jam up your regular board schedules. I would leave that to the board and board leadership, but bypassing CNI is one way to expedite that. We could bring that directly to the full board and not, have the delay between CNI and the consent. So there's options that I think we could talk about in a work session to be able to come up with a process that you as a board feel comfortable with.
How does that sound to you two?
With this process you're recommending, when is it brought to the full board to let them know what? Is that just in a committee report by the board member that's on Flack?
He's saying, it would be I'm sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just saying correct, yes.
I think it's a full board decision. I don't see how us three can make that decision for the full board.
Yeah, I agree with that. So do we need a motion, or can we just pass that along as our
I
advice?
think we just pass it along.
Yep. Yep. So what I'll do is I'll work with Dr. Albin in our normal agenda submission process to have this place on the agenda. My guess is with all the things going on, I can't tell exactly where it'll fall. Right now, Brian, are there any things that are in the queue for approval that'll go to Flack this coming year?
Yeah, we always have resources that can go to Flack. And the other thing is that Jamie and I, because we've been anticipating you all determining what new process to take, we have not moved forward with determining the replacing the members of Flack and things like that. We've been holding off. So we have not scheduled any meetings for Family Life at this point in time.
So I guess my recommendation hearing that, Brian, is to go ahead and proceed with the regular Flack process. It's similar to many of the other board committees where we have vacancies. I would definitely recommend that we move forward with getting that body moving as far as filling vacancies and so on and so forth. And at the same time, we'll then engage in this presentation to the board so that they can have a conversation around process. I don't know when that'll hit the agenda, but we'll leave that up to the superintendent and board leadership. But we'll be prepared to come back and explain what your options are or what we perceive your options to be. Okay?
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that sounds very good. Thank you. I had one question. See if I can find it. When it had to do with the opioids and lethal effects of fentanyl, and it said it would be a standalone program. What do you mean by standalone program in that context?
So that was a little bit of a debate as to exactly what is a standalone program and what that means, and that was a conversation that we had at the state. We actually tried to get the legislators to modify that because, again, it's not really best instruction to pull kids out to do one thing and then do everything else. We kind of embed everything together. But basically what that means is that we are just doing a kind of a unit related to substance abuse. With substance abuse inside of that unit, we are making sure that we address opioids and fentanyl. And so we have used the state developed a toolkit, Operation Prevention, which is one of the resources that we've been using. And we also use EverFi, which FCPS is a partner with. And so they have a substance abuse lesson as well. So we partner with EverFi, we use Operation Prevention. And then there are some other materials that our teachers have worked on, brought those together to implement kind of our own FCPS resource that best fits our needs.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So, Ms. Yoha, I would like to thank Brian and Jamie because they, in their role in our system, a lot of the work that has a big impact on students and our community is kind of behind the scenes work. It's not super public. So just working with Flack and School Health Council, and I do appreciate their efforts. We do benefit that both of these gentlemen are very connected across the state with their colleagues. And so we learn a lot about best practices or things that are coming away well in advance. So I do want to thank both of them for their efforts in that regard.
Absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep.
Thank
And
you.
you two are free to roam the planet. Have a great day, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Okay. And next we have CTE Reserve Grants, correct?
Yeah. So welcome to Dr. Pearl. I'll thank her up front. Dr. Pearl has been able to do a lot in her tenure here and really over the last, I'm going into my 7th year. I've learned a lot of things about CTE. I will tell you that rarely is something simple in CTE. There's some complexities when it comes to writing these grants and those types of things. And Frederick County has been very successful when you compare us to other districts across the state with the revenue that we bring in, the program improvement that's occurred. And so I wanted to thank Dr. Pearl for her efforts, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about a little bit more money. So thank you, Christine.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Let me explain first. Our primary source of grant funding for CTE is Perkins. And you've probably heard of Perkins, which is federal funds. States are required to hold back up to 10% of the Perkins allocation that they receive for reserve grants. These are competitive grants. So they're different than our Perkins allocation, which is based on a set formula. This year, we applied for 4 Perkins grants. They're small grants. They're only about $10,000 each. 3 of them were for professional development, and 1 was to institute some new industry certifications in our agriculture program. I am happy to report that they were all 4 fully funded. However, due to the challenges of these crazy times and over the summer, we only recently received our NOGO, which is the Notice of Grant Award, although the state did give us spending authority for some of the professional development that took place over the summer. So just so you're aware, some of the professional development in these grants has already taken place. So let's start first with the ag piece, because I'm very excited about that. As you are aware, throughout the last few years, we've been really trying to bring all of our program studies in CTE up to a standard so that we were able to offer industry certifications. And ag is one of the few that the state does not currently recognize an industry certification. So through a lot of research and working with folks at the state level and our local program advisory council made up of industry folks in the agricultural community, we were able to identify a company, ICEV, which has a variety of ag certifications, and the state is letting us kind of test them out. I will provide data, and then hopefully they will approve those going forward as industry certifications for the entire state. Now, as you know, probably Frederick County is the largest agricultural county, and so it makes perfect sense that Frederick County would be the one who would be participating in kind of pushing this forward. So the grant was to offer certifications in animal science, vet medical application, plant science, floral design, and principles of small engines, so that all of our 3 agriculture CTE programs of study have an industry certification developed by industry folks, and in many cases recognized within the competencies that are recognized for entry-level employment in those areas. So we will be testing these later this semester and in the spring for our concentrator students. Those are the students who have made it to the 3rd of the 4th courses. So our concentrator students will be trying these out. We'll again be collecting data. We've already done a good bit of analysis to our essential curriculum and found that there's terrific alignment. And of course, we spent much of the summer preparing for virtual learning. So we were able to create even greater alignment. One other unsuspected, I suppose, positive out of this is that ICEV also offers a lot of online curriculum. So we were able to get that for free for the fall, and we've incorporated many of their videos into our curriculum. So for example, it's difficult to teach welding when you're teaching students at home. You know, now they're at least able to see visually, to see the operation of these pieces of equipment, to see professional floral designers do designing. So in addition to the instruction that they're receiving from their teachers, they're able to visualize on the pieces of equipment that they will actually be tested on, and where their competencies, you know, where they need to become strong for their area of study. So that is one that I'm very excited about. The other PD grants were for various professional developments. As you probably know, many of our industries require that our teachers be kept up to date in their own industry standards. So for example, our automotive teachers every summer have to go to a NATEF or an automotive training of some sort. Our Cisco teachers needed to be updated on all the changes for Cisco. Project Lead the Way, our teachers need to be trained, and so on. So the majority of the trainings that were to take place face-to-face this summer, of course, did take place virtually, but the majority did still continue. There's only 2 that we were not able to participate in, and one was canceled for print ed because it was out of state. Of course, we weren't allowed to travel. And then there's one for a very small conference that's just for our counselors to go to typically in the fall to learn about Project Lead the Way. That's been canceled. But other than that, the rest of the trainings are went ahead as scheduled. And then a few have been postponed until this coming June. It's still in the grant cycle, and we're hopeful that we will be able to send our teachers to those at that time. So with that, are there any questions?
Oh, I was trying to think. You gave great examples because floral arrangements, I thought to myself, oh, I could see doing that. Welding, like you gotta do that. Seeing it's good, but that's got to be done. Which led me to ask about if it's an appropriate time to ask about small groups here. If it's not, I'll hold off. But because I want you to finish your grant presentation, so I'll ask that in a minute. But
Okay.
No, that sounds good. No other questions then?
None for me. Thank you.
I've none.
And so, Christine, are we looking forward for that to go? Were these informational only, right? These were not seeking board approval. Okay.
Well, I'd have to double check because it said informational, but then it also said with consent, so that
So they may.
the
Okay.
wording was a little confusing to me.
So, Linda, do you know if this is scheduled to go to consent this evening?
It is on the agenda, I believe.
All right. So that would be, we'd be seeking your approval to move it forward to consent this evening because of the time sensitive nature.
Gotcha. And all in favor of moving that ahead? Aye.
Yes.
Okay.
Aye.
Yes, we're never going to stop money, that's for sure. So if you could just speak, I know we're getting a presentation on how small groups are going, but I thought since we have you here from CTE, if you could just talk to us about your plans for that.
Sure. So we did work, Mike Concepcion and I worked this summer to develop options for students to return to CTC as well as select CTE programs of study, and made recommendations for those in the comprehensive schools. That was more my area, and did in fact recommend for the ag mechanics, which involves the welding. So for some of our agriculture programs, small engines, that the schools consider bringing those folks in. And then we also, for wood design and applications, the suggestion was that we focus on the design part for the first term, but we look at that return for second term. And the way that the schedules that we submitted worked is that students would only come in one afternoon a week, and they would be in small groups. But it does at least give some time for some practice, some hands-on practice, which I know their students would much appreciate. Because it's, like we said, it's hard to teach some of those topics by theory only. You really have to get in and get your hands dirty and practice and apply the knowledge.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody have any other questions or comments?
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's great to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, anything else then for us today, Dr. Cuppett?
We could probably do a look ahead at the agenda. What's currently scheduled for the next meeting, Linda? You're on mute.
Sorry. Elementary social studies updates, the Striving Readers Evaluation Report,
Okay.
and English Language Arts updates. That's October 7th.
Okay. And barring us having to move something up for expedited review, that looks like that'll fill the agenda for next time.
Very good. And I just wanted to thank everybody for being willing to still meet virtually because of schedules. And then we also felt that the time we're going to be in person later today was enough up close and personal that it would help us out if, if we could meet virtually. So appreciate that. And so we'll move forward and let you know. My feeling is, I want to be upfront about this. I feel as we move into the fall, it's not getting better. So I hope you all are okay with meeting virtually until further notice. But thank you. Okay. And if there's nothing else, for the good of the group, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Good to see you.
See you later.